welcome to Prototech's Mastercam 2024 rollout video series. In this video, we'll take a look to mill 3D enhancements found in Mastercam 2024. First enhancement we're going to take a look at is we now have first and last lead functions found in several of our high-speed surfacing toolpaths. Over the last few years, we've seen many enhancements to the leads page on the surface machining toolpaths. We have a first and a second lead. We can control a vertical or horizontal lead and lead out, extensions, lots of neat stuff added. As it's been adding, I've been mentioning in classes and stuff that it reminds me of multi-axis lead and lead outs. They even have more stuff than we have in surfacing. And this new enhancement, once again, reminds me it's very similar to what we see into many of the multi-axis toolpaths. If we expand the linking parameters topic here in the high-speed toolpath, there is now a first and last lead page where I can do a custom entry and a custom exit just for the very first entry and for the very last exit. So here in Mastercam, maybe I want to customize the first entry because I need to get into material and I want a bigger arc in or something. Or here, what I have for exits is I have a 40 thou extension, and then I have a large kind of helical ramp coming out. I'd just like to point out too here, I have the advanced display turned on, otherwise everything's blue and yellow. I really like the advanced display. It was one of them just quality of life enhancements several versions ago. I pretty much always have that on. The lead-ins are green and the exits are red, transitions are purple. It really helps me identify why is that move going there. Well, if I see what color it is, it gives me more information. I better know what to go fix. So here I see some exit moves, but here my very last exit move, I'm in a smaller pocket and I'm getting the 40 thou lead out, but there's not room for the 40 thou extension, but there's not room for the arc out. So I have another toolpath here, and in this one, underneath the linking parameters, it's got the same entry and exit. So I'll have this entry and exit everywhere, except for what I can do is customize the very last lead out. So in the past, I would have to change it. And it would change all the exit moves. Now I can just change the lead out. I just switched it to an 80 thou vertical arc. If I look at that, now my very last pocket, my exit move fits. So I now can do, custom first entry and last exit moves. There also have been enhancements made to the raster toolpath. The raster toolpath is a nice simple 3D toolpath. If I understand how my machining angles work, I basically set a machining angle and all the cuts are parallel to that angle. I had some control on the ordering of the cuts. I basically just it wants to perform the cut in a certain manner, and I have some changes to that. I have this new clusters option. So lanes is what it basically always did before. Lanes is the same as 2023 and older. And then I could do lanes and I could use optimize right next to it there. So that's what I had before, 2023 and older. What I have now is I have clusters and I have optimized clusters. So I basically have two new things, clusters and clusters optimized. So I'm going to look at all four. I'm going to look at lanes, lanes optimized, clusters, clusters optimized to identify the differences in the enhancements in 2024. So here, this first toolpath just uses lanes. This is basically just if I did a raster in 23 and older, this is basically what I get, and it kind of shows the base mechanic of this toolpath. This toolpath here, as I play it, it wants to finish each cut. So because there's interruption, it'll pick up around, and so it basically wants to work its way always left to right and finish out each lane, as it's called now. So I get a lot of jumping around. So what I was able to do in the past is I could optimize that. So I've optimized on this one. Lanes is what basically we have always had. So when I optimize that, it now will try to optimize basically tries to cut one region at a time instead of always trying to finish that lane. But it's still got that core mechanic of always wanting to work its way left to right. So now it jumps over and cuts that pocket, and now where it matches up again, but that's familiar mechanics. That's how it's worked. That's what the optimize does. It tries to do a region. Clusters is a little bit different. So this one just has clusters on. This is the new function, no optimize. So clusters is kind of like optimize on, but not exactly the same. And what it does is it kind of breaks out of that always left to right mechanic. And it wouldn't, in this scenario, it's left to right. If I change my machine angle, it could be top to bottom or something different, but it always kind of wants to start on one edge and then have the same step over direction all the time. And what clusters does is it's kind of like optimize, it just does that region, but instead of always wanting to do that left to right, it goes to the next closest region. Now, sometimes cluster can't kind of find the regions, and here's jumping again, kind of like what lanes did. So on top of that, I can also do this toolpath here has clusters and optimize on. So with clusters and optimize, it helps clean up those where it doesn't find the breaks, it doesn't break it up. So if I look at that one, machine's this first region. Now instead of wanting to do that left to right, it just goes to the next closest. And now the optimize came into play here into these regions. And then at the end, it comes back and finishes that last region. So those are just some new options in there. Specifically, the last two are the new ones, clusters and then clusters optimized. I had another enhancement to my full vertical retracts. It's now possible to edit the part clearance when I'm on full vertical retracts. So I've always had part clearance, but it was grayed out. It was only available if I did minimum vertical retract or minimum distance. Now I also have that option when I'm doing full vertical retract. You'll only notice a difference in this, say, if you have like a negative retract. It would, even if, so say that negative 0.5 would hit something. If you have that as part of your tool path, it wouldn't hit it, it would clear it, but you couldn't control how much it cleared it by. I believe it did it by 2 or 4 millimeters. It was just a hard-coded value. You couldn't edit it. Now it's basically just opened up and editable. So it's just an expansion, really, of our current functionality. What I'd really like to point out more on this one is some of the related functions with it. Specifically, so if I look at it here, when I do full vertical retract, I now get part clearance. I used to be grayed out. I used to only get it with minimum vertical retract and minimum distance. Now these minimum distance and minimum vertical retract are awesome. It looks at the model, only picks up as high as it needs to, so it helps optimize your tool path. But I just want to give a little warning on these. When I mention these, I like to warn them. It's kind of like dynamic milling and your micro lifts, but that forces you into feed rate. This does the same thing. It figures out the minimum distance it needs to pick up in a straight line, but many machines dogleg. So for instance, if I got to go from 0, 0 to 4, 10, X4, Y 10, or, it'll end up, most machines won't go in a straight line move. It'll go X4, Y4 at a kind of like a 45, and then finish out the rest of the move to Y10. Many machines, when in rapid, the axes move at maximum rate simultaneously, so you don't get straight line moves. Well, it figures out how far to pick up in a straight line move, so that can get you in trouble. So this is kind of dangerous. If you turn these on, where I'm going with this here is you want to make sure to also turn on feed rate, or eventually it's just going to burn you. You're going to get in trouble with it. That's not new. I just like to throw that warning out there. What's new? This part clearance is always in on these functions. What's new is even when I go full vertical retract, I still have access and can edit my part clearance. Mastercam 2024 also sees some enhancements to pencil. I love the pencil toolpath. I still remember when it came out. I believe it came out in version 9. It was in a mold shop, and it made a big difference. What it does, you can pick the whole part, and it just traces where the cutter hits tangent to 2 walls at once, or 2 spots at once. So it basically traces all the corners. And if you had any cusping in the corners, that was the worst stuff to polish out. So it made polishing so much easier. If you're not polishing, you can get a single pass down through the corners. It makes just a much crisper, nicer looking part. Doesn't add a whole lot of cycle time. It's got some options in it to make it a viable alternative to finish remachining. I really like the pencil toolpath. We saw a lot of enhancements to it when it was new. Haven't seen much enhancements to it for a while. It's nice to see an enhancement to it again. And what they've done is pencil has never supported avoidance geometry. Now it does. So I've figured out workarounds because I've been using it and love it for years. So I figured out workarounds, and now you could still use the workarounds. So if you have stuff that works, that should still work. But now you have the additional choice of using avoidance geometry with your pencil. So here on this part, say I'm just trying to pencil this radius coming down into this corner, so it's kind of L-shaped. So what I did is I just picked kind of the minimum faces. Go back to a top view here, so it's kind of aligned. So to simplify this, I just have the surfaces. I just picked these faces. I was hoping to get, that one corner. But if you just pick these faces, it cuts anywhere where there's like tangent to spots. So like these corners here, it wants to roll down because a cutter would hit, those two walls there. So it puts a cut there. So I learned pretty quick that you can't do that. I mean, my workaround is, I pick the whole part and then I look at where I have the cut I want. I can see where the blue lines are where I want, and I would draw in, geometry around that. I keep going around encasing all that and then just pick that as containment. So I picked the whole model so it wouldn't gouge stuff. Right now it's gouging. If I turn this on to, it's gouging down to the part, so I only picked those few faces. That's another important lesson, and one of the first lessons we teach in our surfacing class. If it's not selected, it's ignored. It can gouge it. It has to be part of the toolpath for it to be looked at. I have gouges here. So, I mean, the workaround still works, or what I can do now is in 2024, I can add avoidance regions. If you didn't know it, an easy way here, if you want to add the whole parts avoidance region, is you can right click and say add remain addies. Adding avoidance regions adds crunch time, so I mean I would probably still use both methods depending on the model, but this one crunches pretty fast and works great. I can now add avoidance geometry to my pencil toolpath. Another great toolpath that sees enhancements in 2024 is the 3D surface blend toolpath. In the live rollouts, I kind of asked if anybody was using it. I didn't see too many hands. It is not part of our default surface training. I used to use it a lot, and then they kind of rebuilt all the toolpaths in the high speed kind of interface, and this one didn't get added to that right away, so I kind of quit using it. Several years ago now it was added again, and if you're not familiar with this toolpath, when I used to train it, I would kind of ask people if they use Flowline. A lot of people use Flowline. Flowline has some pretty common weaknesses. If you have a lot of faces, the UV directions could be mismatched. That can be problematic. The normal direction of the face matters. There's some things that are unique to Flowline where they can be problematic. And there's ways of working around it, but what I would usually tell people, Flowline's great. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, instead of editing surfaces, rebuilding surfaces, surface finish blend is a great alternative. It functions and gives you paths a lot like Flowline, except for instead of it going off of the UV directions of the faces, you pick two chains. So you pick like one edge of the surface and the other edge of the surface, and it morphs between the two chains. It's a lot like the 5-axis morph, or we have a 2D blend if you're using any of the other ones. We see some enhancements to that in 2024. So first off, in 23 and older, if you picked some chains, so I'm just cutting this, just zoomed in a small little radius on the part there. And on smaller radiuses, you'd sometimes get some faceting in the pattern. It's supposed to follow that radius. So a lot of times when I see that, I go to the toolpath tolerance, I tighten it up. But it didn't fix the issue in 23 and older for the high-speed blend. It was actually tied to the curve chordal deviation in the configuration. So you'd have to tighten up your chord, and usually I consider that tolerance to do more with drawing and how accurate curves are put on faces. So tighten up the tolerance wouldn't have any effect on that, and that's what's changed. Now in Mastercam 2024, you can just simply tighten up your toolpath tolerance and you'll get a smoother, better match on your curves. So it's no longer tied. They broke that connection. It's no longer tied directly to your curve chordal deviation in the config. So it just works how you expect it to work. Tighten up the tolerance, that gets cleaner. They also, on the blend spiral, or on the blend toolpath, it has a spiral option. Some of our other toolpaths have that as well. Instead of doing a cut and then doing a step over, it slowly kind of morphs to the next path. And the way that the blend path usually works is the first cut is exactly centered on your blend curve, and then the last path is on your last blend curve. But when you went to spiral, it didn't do that. It would start on your blend curve, but immediately start its spiraling pattern, leaving it, which by the end of your first pass could leave a little bit worse finish there, or some larger cusps than elsewhere. And there's nothing you do on this one either. If you programmed a blend spiral in 23 and open it in 24 and regenerated it, it would just automatically correct. And what it does now is it does like you would expect. It does its first pass fully around on the blend curve, and then from there it starts spiraling out, maintaining a better finish. So just both of those, there's nothing really to do there. They just work different now in 24. They work better. We also see enhancement to equal scallop. Equal scallop was added a handful of years ago, effectively for me replacing the scallop toolpath. Now they left the scallop in there as well. They said that was a decision they made because there's such big changes to it. Instead of replacing it, all the legacy files would then need to be regenerated, and because all the changes could have got a little bit different varying results on legacy files. So they left the original scallop in, but they added the equal scallop. The equal scallop uses all your cores to crunch at once, and the scallop toolpaths are a bit bigger. And sometimes scallops, you get some distortion in your patterns, and the equal scallop added some tolerances to help clean these distortions up. What's new in this version is the seed curves. You can now use point geometry. Now, the equal scallop is a fairly new toolpath, so some of these other things I want to talk about and show a little bit. I want to show how seed curves influence the pattern in general. Really, the only thing new here is that you can use point geometry for seed curves, but I have a feeling that not many people are using these collapse, seed curves to influence the scallop, so I just wanted to explore it a little bit. So here I just did basically a traditional scallop. It is the equal scallop, but it's the outside in type collapse. There's where some of that distortion stuff I'm talking about, and they've added some stuff to fix some of that in the equal scallop. I have tolerances depending on if my containment is creating the distortion. I have a tolerance on the containment, or steep shallow angles. I have a tolerance there. It can also be caused by drive and check faces, and then I adjust that with stock to leave on my check. That's just a traditional scallop. The scallop is a great toolpath because it leaves an even finish everywhere. But the downside to it is it's all patterned off the outside shape. And sometimes I have internal corners, and then my toolpath shape doesn't match the internal corners, and it doesn't look great. I could finish that up with a pencil. That helps a lot. But I have some other options here as well. So another new option I have in the equal scallop on the toolpath control page, uh, this was with equal scallop, not new in 24, is I can do trimmed offsets. And it's a bit more like it started in the center and worked its way out, whether you start in the center or not, and then it expands out so you can end up with trimmed passes. It changes the pattern a bit. So let's go to a top view here, and there you can kind of see it's kind of almost more like an inside out collapse pattern versus an outside in collapse pattern. And then what I can also do with scallop, once again, that can, here I just made a stock model of the trimmed offset one. I mean, I end up with cusps in the corners, so I'm talking pencil would be great on that. Or, I mean, I would prefer to cut kind of following that shape more to begin with instead of just running into them corners. So that's where I can start introducing seed curves. So this is what's new in 24 is I can do points as seed curves. So this is what it looks like if I had points as seed curves. It kind of influences to that point. So here is it's a trimmed offset again. So there's trimmed offset, just letting it go. There's trimmed offset with those seed curves. You can see how that influences the pattern. But I would still also like to kind of follow that internal corner shape too. So this isn't new, but I just wanted to show it here. I can have more curves in there. I now have those points, and I have those kind of loops, and now those are all used to influence the pattern. I go to that point, to that loop. I like this a lot better. My blue lines are much more matching the shape of my part. Those seed curves are great to use when using the scallop toolpath. Another minor enhancement here is just a wording change. It's in a handful of my toolpaths in 2024. In 2023 and older, they called it expand inside outside in these collapsing toolpaths. Now it's just reverse cut order. Exact same function, behaves the exact same way, just a different wording in the exact same spot. I also have an enhancement to my waterline in 2024. In 2023, we saw a detect undercuts enhancement in the OptiRough. So if you're rest roughing off of a stock model, and if there are undercuts to it, it wouldn't see it. It's like if you just poured water right over it, saw it straight down. So it would just keep cutting even though there wasn't material left. Didn't understand undercuts. And that was enhanced for OptiRough in 2023. In 2024, that same enhancements added to waterline. So, we kind of went into this in 2023. So 2024, I'm just going to show you, there's the before and after 2023 and older. If I did a waterline rest rough, it just keep going down. If it was a simpler shape, I could edit a max depth limit, but if there's varying depths, it's kind of painful. Now I can simply just detect stock breakthrough when I'm on my stock, trim to stock page from a stock model, and I get much better results similar to what was done with OptiRough in 23. And that concludes our Prototex Mastercam 2024 rollout for Mill 3D enhancements. Make sure to check out our other rollout videos. Thanks.